shall be fulfilled. Then Queen Esther answered, If I have won your favor, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me. That is my petition. And the lives of my people. That is my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have held my peace. But no enemy can compensate for this damage to the king. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, Who is he? And where is he who has presumed to do this? Esther said, A foe and enemy, this wicked Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, Look, the very gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, stands at Haman's house, 50 cubits high. And the king said, Hang him on that. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the anger of the king abated. Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, enjoining them that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and also the 15th day of the same month, year by year, as the days on which the Jews gained relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make of them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another, and presents to the poor. May God bless this reading to our understanding.
That I may ever be a picture so much. That was amazing. Especially the guitar solo right in the middle. That was excellent. Good morning. My name is Shannon Fleck, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. I currently serve as the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches. And if you haven't heard of us, it's my pleasure to introduce you to us. We are a coalition of 17 different Christian denominations, of which the Disciples are one. We are also partners with interfaith organizations and community organizations. And as a big group of about 600,000 people in the state of Oklahoma, we do advocacy ministry, social justice work, interfaith engagement, and emotional and spiritual care. So, fun fact, I am also a member of Southern Hills Christian Church. Bet you didn't know that. And you probably didn't know that because I spend my Sundays doing what you see in front of you. I visit churches and visit congregations who are members of the conference. And so that is my Sunday job, but I am with you in spirit, know that. And I want to also thank you as a congregation for your membership in the Conference of Churches and for your support. This has been an interesting week. It's been a very interesting week if you've been watching the news. And so I just want to say, I'm not saying anything political. But I do want to say to any person in the room for whom the actions and words of this week have triggered emotions, perhaps from the past, perhaps from the present, that you are seen and you are loved wholly by God, and that I pray for strength in this hard time. The early morning sun began to peek into her room. It didn't bother her. She had been awake for hours, replaying the possibilities over and over again in her mind. It was a big day, a life-altering day, a day where another person would, yet again, hold power over her quality of life. She mulled over her clothing options painstakingly. She had to be careful not to be too feminine or distracting, but still regal and noteworthy. She had to command the room with her presence, while never, ever seeking to overshadow those who held power over her. There's a distinct reason she didn't tell her confidants about her plans. They would have talked her out of it instantly, fearing for the potential outcome that could befall her. If she looked at him wrong or lost his favor in any form, her life would be over. As long as she maintained her place, didn't step out of line, made no distractions of herself, she could continue living without disturbance, blissful within her den of silence. It was time. Ready or not, the moment had arrived, and there was no time to turn back from the decision she had made. The decision to take a stand, as unpopular as it might be. As she entered the room, she felt the multitude of eyes fall upon her. Who knows what they were thinking as she made her way towards the center? She could guess. She wasn't called upon to appear. She wasn't summoned to his presence. She decided again to make her presence known without being asked, and knows there is likely going to be a price to pay. She notices his place, seated above her, in order to, quite literally, look down at her. His power is wafting from his seated position, and she wonders what her fate will be. Whose story is this that I just told? Yeah. This woman, Esther, that risks her safety to speak her truth. And after the events of this week, maybe it was a little confusing. One could easily picture a Senate judiciary hearing where a woman who has quite literally risked the safety of her silence to speak her truth. She likely still wonders what her fate will be, as our society makes its assumptions and even hatred known to her. Yes, the story I have told is not hers, it is Esther's. An ancient story of power and of truth. The storyteller of the book tells the tale brilliantly. It's like reading a novel with a plot that moves. We get engulfed in what will happen and how the story will end. It's told as a novella. We are likely enthralled by this story because we too wonder what will happen when the powerful are confronted with the truth of those who are hurt. The book of Esther has a little bit of history, a little bit of its own difficulty in its addition to what would become the Hebrew Bible. It was constantly debated about whether or not it was worthy of being included in this holy canon. Likely for a few reasons. It did, after all, have at its center a female heroine, a female leader. And second, no mention of God. But we aren't going to let those details stop us today, because we know in the Christian church that we, human beings who breathe the breath of the divine, speak for and with God to instill God's ministry here on earth as it is in heaven. The story of Esther is the power of the human voice and the bravery of speaking out loud to injustice. How appropriate it is that today is Reconciliation Sunday. And I looked ahead on the calendar because I am also preaching for World Communion Sunday, which is next Sunday. How appropriate that Reconciliation Sunday precedes World Communion Sunday, when all of God's people are invited and welcome to the table, where all churches, not just us disciples of the Red Cup, will be gathering around their communion tables, knowing that we are in it together. But before we are in it together for real, there is some reconciling that must be done. Today, the reconciliation ministry of the Christian church is working to break down systems of oppression that effectively marginalize people through practices of social and economic exclusion. Reconciliation ministry offers anti-racism and anti-oppression trainings throughout the church to foster a denomination-wide understanding of the importance of dismantling systemic racism and poverty in our community. I took that right from the Disciples website. It's beautifully said. It's bold. It's very bold, and it's a worthy goal. One that has existed for the entirety of humanity. For as long as there are those that wield power over others, there will be a need for reconciliation. Esther is a Jewish woman, living her life within the palace as queen. Even though she is a cultural minority, being Jewish, and her gender makes her less important, She asks for the king's mercy on her people. Not only does she ask for the safety of her people, she goes a step further and names their oppressor. So many things could have gone wrong in this interaction. Esther dared to come forward to see the king without being summoned to do so, which was a big no-no. You only saw the king if he deemed it necessary. If he wanted to see you, you got to see him. But she dares to go on her own. She asked something of the king that would not have been popular for him to do, to stand up for this minority culture, to take a physical step to defend and uplift them and protect them from the abuse of those in power. She named the individual who had done the wrong, and that could have definitely gotten her killed. What we find in the interaction was not the death of Esther, but the welcome of her presence, the grace to recognize people who were hurting, and ultimately the willingness to believe her and act. The king believed her. This woman who had no power, who answered only to him, and he believed her. In order for the true work, the work of reconciliation to be done, those in power have to first open the door to conversation. Second, to hear with open ears the plight of those who have been shoved to the margins of this world. Third, believe them. And fourth, be willing to act to make it right. This is not small. In a world that has entire systems constructed around the idea that certain people are better than others, we, as the people of God, must work with intention. But ultimately, we have to start with ourselves. Where in our lives do we hold power? Maybe we have power because of the color of our skin. Maybe we have power because of our gender. Maybe we have power because of our economic status, or because of our sexuality, or our age, or ability. This can be the hardest part. Admitting the power that is handed over to us, not earned by us in any way, handed to us by sheer status of our lives. It is really hard to see privilege when you have it. But think instead now of the ways in your life that you don't have power. I bet it's pretty easy to identify those. We can very easily notice where we don't have power and authority, or where we are lacking because we feel that. As you feel the active feelings of being less than someone else. Privilege exists silently within our being, never actively alerting us to its presence, but always there. It is stealth in its existence. So much so that those in power cannot see it. It exists. The Conference of Churches has begun a series on the introduction to white privilege. These workshops are conducted because we believe that the first step in true reconciliation is acknowledging openly our privilege and power. Many people's response to this has been to be defensive or even angry. I understand. This is hard. But again, I say that we have to show up with open ears. We have to believe what people are telling us and be willing to act. These systems exist. I promise they do. And we have to engage in the work to make it better. It exists within systems in our society. It exists within systems that allow young men of color to be shot and killed over and over and over and over again. It exists in a criminal justice system that incarcerates people of color at an alarmingly high rate, effectively replacing the old Jim Crow laws within our country and keeping those of color at bay. It exists within movements of women who have to live their lives in the silence of the sexual victimization they have experienced. They exist in silence and shadows as to not offend the men of power in our world, or worse yet, to not be believed. It exists within public outrage at a black man kneeling during the national anthem in order to call attention to the systems of power who let such things happen. We label it instead as anti-patriotism. It exists within the terror of any person struggling with the decision to finally come out of the closet, knowing the oppression they will likely face from those who once called them friend and beloved. And it exists within each and every person when we hold fast to our power by turning against the people asking us for help. To be reconciled. Like to be continued. It is a consistent and intentional journey. There is no end point when the process is complete. For as long as some have power and others do not, the work of reconciliation moves on. But, like the book of Esther, human actions are key. God may not be written as a tangible, physical character in her story, but make no mistake, God was there. Just as God is with us all. In the words we speak, the actions we take, we are living and breathing God's ministry of love here and now. This is hard work. It's difficult, challenging, abrupt, loud, and uncomfortable. Do so bravely. Speak bravely. Be brave. Hear the stories. Believe the stories. Be reconciled. Amen.